There's been a prediction that there's going to be a high drop-off of agent count in January, February, with all of the licensings up for renewals.
The trend is they expect it, they anticipate it, they plan for it, and they get creative. And I think that's something that we can learn from just in life in general. Is if you are a top producing real estate agent, you have to know everyone.
I'm your host, Remington Ramsey, and today, backed by popular demand, the Director of Product Growth for Real Producers Magazine, Mr. Bobby Wright. Bobby, welcome to the show.
I'm here. Glad to be here, man.
To be honest, some of my favorite episodes are our own people, where we get to hang out and talk about what we've learned, not just from the podcast, but from our markets, from our data. Our magazine goes to the top 5% of realtors nationwide. I figured out some stats, actually. This is fascinating because I figured this out for the podcast itself. We have 100 and I believe 30-ish locations. We're constantly recruiting, so it's ever-changing depending on when those markets go to print. We do about 1,200 covers a year. The magazine goes to 55,000 realtors individuals, and only 40 of those covers a year get to be on this podcast. So that is a small grouping of the top elite performers. I've had a blast doing the show. What have been some of your favorite episodes? Besides the one that you were on, of course.
Whoa. Yeah. I wasn't even thinking of that one. I was thinking about, we haven't talked about him in a while. Justin Ford, if you remember that episode, he sent me his book. And a couple of weeks ago, I was going through my library, just, as we all do, we've read 10% of the books that are in our library, or maybe if you're not like me, but I found Justin's book that he sent me, and I was so excited to read it, but I put it in my library and I hadn't read it yet. So I pulled it out, and that's going to be my next read. But hearing there was something that drew me toward him, just being like a former MMA fighter and how he takes that into real estate. Yeah, I thought that was cool.
That is cool. There's one thing that I haven't mentioned on this show, but you remember when we interviewed from the Dallas market, Les McGehee? His episode was about humor, right? Humor is a secret to selling. So he didn't tell me this until after we got done filming, but he had just received a call that he beat cancer right before we filmed that. And he didn't want the show to be about that, but he told me afterwards he was super emotional. Yeah, isn't that cool?
Yeah, I spent some time with him, and he never even brought that up.
Yeah, he was. I think he was pretty silent about it, but battling that, and just he wants to bring. His saying is he wants to bring humor to everyone, and felt like that was his calling. So that was a cool episode. I enjoyed that a lot. We've had a couple agents on about YouTube and AI, and still have a couple of immigrants recently that were on the show talking about how Americans don't appreciate the opportunity that we have as much as immigrants do, because they've seen the other side. And we've got a couple episodes coming up that I think are pretty cool there.
Yeah, I talk about, I'm going to butcher her last name, but Kathy, I believe it was DeMillo. Is that right? I was bringing her up the other day. My wife and I were touring a old 150-year-old farmhouse, and I was thinking, what kind of ghosts are flowing through this place? I was reading back on the history of the home, and there was a doctor that owned the home that actually practiced in what is now the office. And I'm thinking,
so there's some pretty cool ghosts.
I got to call Kathy to come here from Buffalo and bring the psychic medium here and just make sure there's nothing going on here before my wife and I offer on this house. That was a cool episode.
Her claim to fame was that she believes she's the only realtor in the nation that uses a psychic medium to basically prepare the people for listing their home.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Well, if you've got that opportunity, more power to you. And then in terms of our own people, some of our best episodes to date, Mr. Aaron Luden at the top of the pack for this year's downloads, from underdog to top dog. How to command attention in a new industry. I just love anytime we get a chance to unleash the beast of Aaron Luden, he has so much knowledge up there. He's a marketing genius down there in Orlando. And then Mike Maletich gives us a little glimpse of his parenting style and how that applies to sales too. That was a fun episode. You remember that one?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, those two folks that I love hearing from as much as possible. Glad that they're a part of our network for sure.
Well, let's jump into today's topic. You and I both have three key takeaways that we have learned. We're nearing the end of 2024. We're gearing up. We're making plans. It's not over yet, but we're definitely finishing strong and wanting to go in with a strong game plan of 2025. So I asked you to write down your three key takeaways. Maybe not in any particular order, just things that are resonating with you at the moment, both from our own company stats and our own discussions. You and I talk on a daily basis, and then also things from the podcast. And I came up with my own three. So we'll get to that here in a second. But what are your thoughts on just general thoughts on how top producing agents are navigating the lawsuits, the interest rates, inflation, the down market, all of that all at once? There's been a prediction that there's going to be a high drop off of agent count in January, February, with all of the licensings up for renewal. So what are your general thoughts? We'll start there.
Well, I think that there's a correlation between the folks that, are still around after times like this and folks that won't be. A lot of top producing agents that we work with have gone through something like this before. And if not in real estate, the amount of people we talk to that were entrepreneurs before real estate and other industries, they've gone through this. And I think the trend is they expect it, they anticipate it, they plan for it, and they get creative. And I think that's something that we can learn from just in life in general. It's just anticipating with a, what is the saying? Expect the worst or prepare for the worst.
Yeah.
There's also kind of a doom and gloom aspect to that too. It's not like we want to sit and wait for the end of times or anything, but I think just preparing for what could possibly happen is something that you see in top producers, anticipating what moves they might make and getting creative when those times come. Takes away some of the shock value of, an NAR announcement, a lawsuit, a down market, changes in interest rates. Yeah. Certainly helps if you've been through those types of things. And I think if you've got a foundation that anticipates and gets creative and you're not caught off guard when they happen, that's what we see in the majority of the folks we work with.
Yeah, I definitely saw that on the local level. So as you know, I still own Indianapolis and operate it. I like to be in the weeds. I like to know what people are saying and how our franchisees are feeling. I also like to lead from the front. If I'm coaching somebody, I'd like to be able to tell them I'm still doing this so I know it works. But because of that, I get my ear to the ground. And in our market, I've seen for the first time agents that have historically been in the top 50, even top 25 at times, that have struggled in the last 18 months for the first time. And I look at their tenure, and it's all of the ones that are post 2008. Because what you saw in 2008 from this, if you got into the business of 2008, 2009, it was as low as ever been. And even through COVID until 2023, really, it was a market where, as you say, we were fat, dumb, and happy, right? If you could breathe, you could sell real estate, right? And then what we've seen is the struggle for the last 18 months. And now you've got a decision to make, because if you look at the other agents, like you're saying, that have gone through multiple recessions, especially some of the agents that have seen that saw 99, that saw other crashes, other things, and they're prepared. They know what's going to happen. They know in the high, like the years where they're crushing it, it becomes easy. They're also making a little bit of a nest for when they know it's going to come back down. And so those agents that are struggling for the first time have a decision to make. Like, am I going to have a success story at the end of 10 years, or is this where it ends?
Yeah. I talked to, thinking of a local commercial realtor here in my town, Steve Lehman. He's been an agent for 45 years. And I had asked him when rates started going up initially, and he started laughing. And he said, you know, if you were around in the 80s, this is nothing. This is just a part of the deal.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, you're thinking about those folks, and we interview a lot of those people for the podcast, you know, that became agents in 2009, you know, where, you know, they didn't have anything anyway. So when they were starting in the business, it didn't matter as much that the market was what it was. They were building from nothing anyway. So they built out of it. And now they're back to, you know, that time where, like you said, it's the first time they're having to go through something like this and they're having to get creative. Some of them are learning that they didn't anticipate this, and they're, you know, hopefully they're prepared to get through it. And most of them are. I mean, you know, where we see folks not lasting through it is people who have become agents within the last 5 years. At least that's the trend I'm seeing across the country. And, you know, maybe we're taking advantage of a really, really good real estate market, and maybe thinking, yeah, maybe thinking that this, or maybe weren't thinking that this wouldn't last forever.
I've been munching on this concept for a couple weeks now. I've been writing about it, and it's this concept that the quicker you attain money, the less respectful you are of it. Right?
Mm.
The easier it is for you to make money, the less incentive you are to actually be good with money, because the thinking, I guess, would be I can just make more. But to flip that, the harder it is and the longer it takes for someone to make their money and come into wealth, typically from what I've seen, the better they are with that money. Not only better, but also more giving with that, more it's not about them. Like I remember seeing this interview with Floyd Money Mayweather right after he had won against, I think it was Manny Pacquiao, and he got like a $200 million check, and he was known for only having one bank account, which is just blows my mind. But in the interview, he goes, they go, we notice you haven't cashed your check yet. Why not? And he goes, because I don't need to. I have a ton of money already. And I remember watching that interview getting so frustrated, just thinking, man, you don't get it. Like, this isn't about you. And then also just how dumb that is with money. And by the way, he had to keep taking fights because he was running out of money. But anyway, to bring that home with what we're talking about, if you got into real estate and it was within the last 5 years and you found a lot of success, the biggest trouble you had was probably yourself getting out of bed. Now you're actually running up against a lot more. You've got to be innovative. And if we flip the script and talk a little bit about what we're seeing with our clients, it's the same thing, right? Like everyone in real estate was on the same trajectory. But then if you look at some of our core industries, lending, title, home inspectors, builders, photographers, junk removal, what are we seeing? What are you seeing? Because you've got the industry data as well. We've got what's the difference between the businesses that, in my opinion, really get it and are doubling down versus the ones that might be pulling out of all their marketing?
Well, first of all, what you're talking about, I mean, you know, if you look at the industry that's the closest to the deal, right? The lenders, unless it's a cash deal, you know, I think you can tell the same story. You know, if you got into lending in the last 5 years, your expectations are way up here. And for a lot of those folks, I mean, gosh, in 2021, people were sneezing loans, man, like refis all over the place, new home purchase. You know, so lenders are very close to, very similar. They're very correlated. We're seeing in the industry with real estate agents. You know, you look at title companies, you know, what are we seeing? We're seeing the same type of thing, you know, that we've seen, people that are involved in almost every deal. I think it's important to bring up what happened with home inspections in 2021. You know, if you look at like real estate agents and lenders and title companies tied to most deals, but think about the amount of inspections that people were waiving just to get in the door of a deal, because there were so many offers, right? Home inspectors had to get creative. So we can almost have a whole separate discussion around what happened to home inspectors in 2021. It's probably still happening a little bit, maybe not so much, but that's a different discussion. But certainly lenders and title companies, maybe you can speak on builders a little bit, but the mainstays that have been through this before, folks that anticipated something like this happening again, knew it wouldn't last forever and prepared for it. And then, I mean, this is something that we saw a trend in across the country of, lenders selling their Mercedes and their, 6, 7 bedroom home that they bought, and they've got one kid and a spouse because they were just having a great time, writing loans, and they purchased a home they shouldn't have, or vehicles that they shouldn't have, and all of a sudden they're up for sale on Facebook Marketplace. I'm being a little facetious there, but you saw people really do what you said in some cases, where it's like you come into money really quick and you get to it very fast without a whole bunch of hills and certainly not enough valleys. You just don't know what you don't know. And we're seeing the result of that if you jumped into the business in the last 5 years.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect segue to one of my top 3 takeaways. So I'll kick us off with that. Why we see a marketing jump in our top 5 categories. I think you asked about builders. So I just had a builder expo in the indie market. We had 14 builders, and I got up on stage in front of 300 people, and I said I selected the builders, and the builders that are all here in the expo that are hanging out at the booths were builders that have historically never pulled out of markets or pulled out of realtor marketing, regardless of what the market was doing. And what you've seen is historically is a bipolar relationship between builders and realtors. Every 10 years, there's a handful of builders that decide we're not going to pay agents anymore. We're just going to cut them out together. They waste our time. They ask for commissions, all this stuff. And then there's a handful of builders that even when those are, that's the valley, right? Even when the valley's happening, they're like, no, we are always going to stick to paying full commissions for realtors, and we're going to make it easier because we understand that they're at the center and we want to love on them no matter what the market's doing. And then so when they come out of it, unfortunately, the bad builders, we'll call them in this case, ruin the reputation. And it's an uphill battle for all these other builders to say, no, we took care of you guys the entire time. And so for real producers, like for me, I got up on stage and was like, I want to champion these guys. I want to champion these 4 presidents who continue to make the right moves, regardless of what the market is doing. They love on you, they support you, and they are continuing to call on you because they understand that you're at the center of the deal. So that's the first takeaway I had, is why we see a marketing jump in our top 5 categories, including builders.
Well, one thing I can say on that is that I learned as a really early on franchise area director with Real Producers in Columbus, Ohio, but something that we just continue to see across the country is that if you are a top producing real estate agent, you have to know everyone. And I think that those builders that you're referring to that stick with those realtor relationships understand that fully. And they know that regardless, the top producing agents that are out there that are maybe showing their clients around town that maybe they're not finding exactly what they're looking for because they have relationships with said builders, are asking that question. Have you ever thought about building? There's a community coming up over here. I didn't know if you considered that, but they bought the land. When the market was good, they bought it for cheap. They're able to do better things with the loan and that sort of thing, better rates because they bought the land so long ago, and they've got some really good lots available. I'd love to show you that. They know that. They know that good agents have to know that. They have to be well-versed and knowledgeable about not just, what other agents are out there, what part of town do they sell, but what builders are out there and what do they have available in their inventory.
100%. Well, let's get to your 3 takeaways, Bobby. What's number 1 on your list?
This is a big one, man. Agents now, top producing agents have always been a challenge to get in front of initially, and then a challenge to get out for a coffee or just get their time to be able to build a relationship. And there's a resounding, overwhelming joke that we hear all the time about, when a vendor does get in front of an agent, they always say things like, let me buy you a coffee and let me show you what we can do, instead of actually like asking questions and building the relationship. But before the pandemic, it was hard enough to get in front of top producing agents. But when the pandemic happened, And you started to see well, first of all, nobody was going into the office, right? But then outside of the pandemic, all of these cloud-based tools and even cloud-based brokerages are being introduced now, and less top producing agents are going in to the office. I was talking to you earlier about, a lot of home inspectors, in 2018, 2019, before that, even employed, folks to come into the office and fill up the candy dish. I mean, you know what, man, in college, like if you wanted to pay me 20 grand to roll around and fill up candy dishes and drum up some conversations, I'm all in, right?
Yeah.
They don't do that anymore. Why? Because top producing agents aren't in the office. You heard a lot of our clients before they met us, or it was a part of their strategy. They were buying lunch and they were, giving presentations at monthly meetings, and would be lucky to have, a couple top producing agents in that brokerage show up. But now you don't see that as much anymore. So, it's harder now than ever to get in front of these top producing agents. Now, obviously, it's not as hard for real producer partners, but overall, it's a lot more difficult to get in front of these top producing agents.
Now, what's interesting about that though is, do you think even that's going to go through an ebb and flow? I was talking to a haberdasher. Is that how you say it? Haberdasher, one who makes custom clothes. And I was thinking, man, if there's ever a tough time in the marketplace for a haberdasher, it's now that
Yeah.
people are staying at home to work. But you know what? As I was talking to him about his business and thinking through myself, like I stopped, admittedly, dressing up post COVID. Like I literally only dress up for certain events, and ones that I had even before, I kind of dressed down a little bit. But part of me kind of wants to dress up again, and part of me, and the more we were working at home, we realized, shoot, we really can't get a lot done with the dogs barking and the kids acting up and all this. And I think that we're going to start to see a little bit of that shift too. So do you feel like there's ever going to be a time where these agents actually do go back into the office and desire to be a part of that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's going to be something that, eases back in for sure. But look at what's happened to our folks, man. I mean, who would have thought, 5, 6, 7 years ago that you could be on Zoom meetings and, get as much done as we get done, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you're an agent, or if you need to go meet somebody for something, to hand them something, that's a different story. But if it's like we need to have a meeting, do we need to go to a coffee shop? Do we need to drive there? Do we need to do those things? Not necessarily. I mean,
Yeah.
so I don't know. I mean, I think you're going to see that. I think people naturally, we crave being in the presence of other people. And quite frankly, this isn't going to cut it for me. Like, I'd rather be with you in person, but sometimes it's just more efficient. So I can see that, continuing to come back a little bit. But if I don't need to go into my office as a top producing agent, and I know that if I do, there's a chance I'm going to get pulled in a direction that I didn't plan to get pulled in, then I'm probably not going to go in the office.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the bottom line.
Working
So,
hard, but no results. All right. Well, I'm going to jump to my number two. So my second one is why it matters to network with other realtors. This stems from a masterclass I had early on in the year. One of our top producing agents, top 3 actually, sat on a panel, and I asked him, I was like, when we first started the magazine and created the events, some of the agents had a question: why would I want to attend events with other realtors? And then I was sitting there in that master class, and I was like, there's 100 realtors here. Why are they showing? They don't get paid to be here. This isn't their local meeting. This is just why would they show up to networking meetings with other realtors? And he said, for the first time in a long time, Indiana went through multiple offers. Like, the market was hot and there was no supply, so everything was a multiple offer. And he said in that time, which had never been before, he was insulated because of how much time and effort he spent networking with other realtors. So much so that he was winning deals over other deals that were packaged better. Maybe it was a cash offer, maybe it was more, but he was still winning those deals because the agent on the other side knew him, liked him, and trusted him to get the job done. And that was very telling for me, not just at the realtor side, but just total networking. like networking with other people in your industry, networking with other people that are competitors, networking. That was an aha moment for me, why it matters to network with other realtors.
Man, so many things to say about this, but I'll just say a couple. I think it's awesome that when we have a franchisee that's been in business for, a couple months, they've had at least one event, two events, but it typically happens that they'll reach out to us or they'll post in our private Facebook group that two agents came up to them arm in arm and they said, "We've done like 3 or 4 deals together and we've never met. This is our first time meeting. Thank you for having this event." I always think that's so cool. But I also remember back in the early days of RP when we had very little clue what we were doing. All we knew was that there were a lot of vendors that were spinning their wheels and really they felt like they were wasting a lot of money not being in front of the right people. And that was enough for us to get going, right? It started with you. But I remember agents saying, why would I ever want to read about other agents? Like, why would I care to go to an event? Kind of like you said. And the only response I could think of, and I think that there's some gray area, but there's some legality around, like, obviously you're not allowed to just like, conflict of interest, tell your client to choose this other agent because they're your friend, right? But there is this other side. And my response was, if you had 3 offers and the highest and best offer for your client was an agent that has a bad reputation, that
Does it get back to you?
historically butchers deals,
Mm-hmm.
that, rakes you over the coals on all kind of things. And the second best offer happened to be an agent with a great reputation that, works in collaboration to help get deals done. And it's no secret locally. Which one are you
Yeah.
recommending to your clients? And most of them don't answer because I feel like there's this, like, I don't know if I'm allowed to answer that, but they all nod their heads north and south and not east and west.
Yeah. Yep. Totally. I'm with you there. Well, that was my second takeaway. What is your second takeaway?
And I think I guess that's great segues, Rem. You didn't even know what I was going to say. It's a great segue. But I also remember being a franchise area director, and I heard about this, in the last couple of years of our other franchise area directors, whether they're in Inland Empire, California, or Boston, Massachusetts, or Space Coast in Florida, top agents looking forward to the market getting challenging because
Yep.
the agents that are not 100% full-time serious, they tend to go in other directions, and it's an opportunity for them to get creative and gain market share. So it goes back to anticipating these things and getting creative, but these are folks that they just spend so much time planting seeds. And again, maybe they've even gone through this before, that they know what happens when it's kind of like the be the buffalo thing that you and I talk about, where if I run straight through the storm, like you see the African buffalo do, then I get on the other end of it and there's not many other animals around but me. I've got the pick of the litter. I've got all the grass to eat. I've got all these opportunities here. It's kind of like that, where we see agents take that approach that have been through this before or whatever. So I think back to that time when I heard them saying, we look forward to the market getting more challenging so we can take over market share. We can get back to, the top producing agents, you know, basically gravitating toward the opportunity that's there.
Yeah, thinning of the herd is a good thing. Like if you're a realtor and you're thinking I've decided I'm going to stick it out even though it wasn't as easy as it once was, like we talked about at the top of the hour. It's one of the reasons why it's going to get easier is because of the people sitting to your left and right that will not be here, that sold to mom and dad and maybe one others that could have been your listing, right? So if you're thinking about, like, just Indianapolis alone, there's 10,000 realtors. Last year, half of them will sell one or less homes. Okay, well, the ones that didn't sell any homes, that's not affecting anybody. The ones that sold one or two homes, those are now going to be back on the market for the realtors that really are doing a great job. And the people that listed their home with their buddy because they want to be loyal to their friend, but then realize ultimately I need a professional, not a friend. This is not the friend. You say all the time, this is not the friends club, right? And if you miss out on dollars and a headache, it's not just about the dollars, it's the headache you go through with these horror stories. I mean, anyway, that's a really strong one as a number two.
Yeah.
So I'll transition to a number three, and then we'll get yours, and then we'll get out of here. My third key takeaway from the year is just how important storytelling is. I mean, at the core of what we do for Real Producers, we are storytellers. We tell the stories of the agents. We share the stories of the vendors. We share stories just from our own platform in terms of marketing. That is what we offer. That's what we offer in the ads. We teach you how to tell your story, how to tell the brand story, but then also how to tell your personal story as it intersects with your brand and with the realtors. We say it all the time. People want to do business with those they know, like, and trust. They're not going to know, like, and trust you unless they know your story. And so storytelling is a big part of what we do. It's a big part of our focus for this year.
Yeah. It does something to you when you're listening to somebody tell a story too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're trying to figure out how we relate to it, and that sort of thing. So absolutely, it's at the forefront for us. This is what we get to do. We so happen to get to tell stories about people who don't get to tell their stories often, and we do it as kind of that third party, brand agnostic platform. And I think that serves us really well. And, we learned that from a very early stage of the Real Producers brand, where, our agents are mostly focused on the stories of the people that they serve. And we now get the opportunity to share their stories. And, based on the results that we're getting from the listeners in our podcast, they've got some good stories to tell.
Oh yeah. I mean, the podcast, I didn't even bring up the podcast, but that's a different, complete form of storytelling where hopefully we're entertaining you in your cars and inspiring you and even connecting you. We've had people on the shows that kind of intersect with other topics, and we connect them nationally, and that's some good conversations happening. You know what you're saying about inspiration. I do want to share this. This really hit home for me with one of my own partners. His name is Mike Wood. Bailey and Wood is a massive presence here in Indiana from the lending standpoint. And I went to one of his events. This is a couple of years ago. And his event was full of realtors, okay, 500 realtors and real estate professionals. And it was a event to award his mortgage brokers. He got 500 realtors to show up to cheer for his own lenders when they were receiving their awards on stage. And one of the first things that alone blew my mind, because that's not an easy thing to do. I'm sitting there and he gets up and in his speech, he's talking about the birth of the company. And behind him is people that work for him, including his daughter, who's now in her 20s. But back when he started the company, he was poor, broke, and wanted to start over. And he said he thought of everything, and he got to the clerk's office, and they said, you have to name it. He had thought of everything except for the name. And he looks down at his daughter, who's, 5 or 6 at the time. And with a tear in his eyes, he goes, well, it's just you and me, Bailey and Wood. And they named it. And when he said that on stage, there's people are tearing up. You're getting chills from this because you see the massive success. We know the end of this story, or at least the middle of it, and it was successful. And so in that moment, you can feel the rags to riches story of just the emotions that he went through to get to where they are. And then you're looking and you're like, no wonder you get 500. I mean, that's the art of storytelling right there.
Yeah. His daughter's in the room, man.
Brutal. I mean, I put myself there. I was thinking about my own daughter, I totally got it. So that was my number 3. Bobby, take us home with your third key takeaway.
For our partners listening, you're aware of this, but all others, you might not be aware. Remington and I host the monthly Ways to Win call, where we talk to our partners about all that we know about connecting with top producing real estate agents, what's important to them, things to pay attention to, how to serve them, how to be an entrepreneur. And, big takeaway for me was an episode that we did titled Belief is Rooted in Truth. And, it makes me think about, when you're going through a challenging time in business or just having a challenging day, and the amount of uh, false narrative that we create based on how we're feeling and not actually what's true. And my big takeaway from that is when we are focused on what's true, we realize that one, it could be harder, and two, we're built for it. And Rem, we joke about the vest. Um, you were saying the 20-pound vest. I corrected you and said it was a 50-pound vest.
Apparently,
And
I've been saying it wrong. Apparently, I've been a little light on my. I got a 20-pound vest. Bobby's like, you know what? But the significance of 50 for you is telling. I didn't know that. Share with them why it's 50 for you.
Yeah, I bought a 50-pound vest because I had lost 50 pounds at the time. And I wanted to be reminded that what that weight felt like. And it was more than just physical for me. I told you when you asked on that podcast that we did, gosh, 6 months ago, 8 months ago. I don't know how long ago it
It was
was.
last year's podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. That, anytime that I caught myself allowing my emotions to dictate, my actions and so on and so forth, I needed to get back to truth. And I got back to truth by making things harder on myself. And at the time, it was remembering that I used to carry 50 more pounds on my back. And, it's grown from that. I think I told you a couple weeks ago, even that, what did I send to you?
But
I ran.
you were. It was when you ended up riding your bike and then running 5K.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. So I had a 30-mile bike scheduled, and my chain blew up a hill. And it's embarrassing. It's happened to me twice where like I was out in front of this church, and like it just so happens that like church let out right when my chain popped. And all these cute little elderly ladies are walking up like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I'm good. My wife's coming." And then, my wife pulls up in my truck with all my kids in the truck, and I got to load my bike in there. And, on the way home, I was being so soft and weak. And, I was complaining, and we were about to my driveway, and I was thinking, my kids, what are they thinking? They just witnessed their father get picked up. His bike broke. He's complaining, "Oh, big, woe is me, tough day," right? And I immediately went in the house and got my running shoes on and went and ran a 5K because I'm like, now's the time. Now's the time to realize what you're built for. And I can't believe that you're allowing this to dictate the rest of your day. Beautiful day,
Yeah.
1:00 p.m. on a Sunday. It's like, come on, man. You're built for better than this. So the vest turns into other things too, but I think the biggest takeaway is it could always be harder, and we're built for harder.
Yeah, it could always be harder. What I love about that is you were on the show a year ago and you shared that, and ever since you did, I bought my vest and I have put it on. And I remember running one day thinking about our conversations and how we make each other better. And I had the opportunity to turn back and run in the shade and run a less hilly option. And I was thinking to myself, well, that'd be probably better. I could serve a little bit of energy and I could run faster. And then I realized that I was just being weak. And in that moment, you and I had just talked that day about taking the road less traveled and making things challenging for yourself. And so I didn't. I turned left and I went up the hill in the 100-degree weather. That's what it was. It was 100 degrees, and I was like, it's probably not good for me. It probably shouldn't run out there,
But you got
like.
through it.
But I did, and I felt I was so happy that I chose in that moment to do that, and that's when I texted you, and that's where I'd like to end this podcast is just when we have something like that, it's not just a cute little thing we said one time. We do it, man. Like we really try to push and strive to take the lessons that we learn from these phenomenal people take steps to being 1% better every single day. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you for pushing me to be 1% better every single day. And hopefully this podcast as 6 key takeaways will inspire people to be better as well.
Appreciate you too, Rem.
All right. Well, that's been the Real Producers Podcast. If you want to influence who we have on the show or what we talk about, email us at podcast@realproducersmag.com and visit realproducersmag.com to see where you could launch a Real Producers franchise. We'll see you next time.